Hello everyone, thank you for joining us. My name's Henry Normal and this is the new Poetry Society and this is episode 10. I hope you've enjoyed any that you've seen so far, and I'd like to thank the Inspire people at the libraries for helping us put this on, and for Metronome, who do all the technical stuff, and the Nottingham Poetry Festival, especially Craig Chettle, a very unsung hero. Craig helped me form the Nottingham Poetry Festival about 6 years ago, so a big shout out to him. And thank you. Thanks to NTU, Nottingham Trent University, who do a bit of backing for us, and the Arts Council. Also do backing on drums or something like that. Thanks to all the people that's been involved over the course of the 10 weeks. I've really enjoyed it. We've got Ryan on today doing the tech, and we've had Jake in the past, and I'd like to thank them personally for all their hard work. I've really enjoyed it, and I'm really going to enjoy today's show. If you haven't seen the format before, essentially I've got a guest, which I'll be introducing in a second, and we're going to chat, we're going to do some poems, and we're going to answer some questions. And we've got a chat facility down the side of the screen, and you can send some questions in that, and you can also send questions in the Q&A section. And about halfway through, we're going to be on for an hour, so about half an hour, I'll start looking at the questions and putting them to Pete, who's my guest. And we'll see what happens. Who knows? It's all good. So, without further ado, as they say, do you know people only ever say that when they're introducing people, don't they? So, without further ado, one of my favourite people, you mind poets, very, very good old friend of mine, but also a great artist, a great sculptor, a great graphic designer, and also a great poet. Please welcome Pete Ramskill. Hiya, Pete.
I've got to live up to that now, have I?
You've got to, well, you got to live up to being a human being. That's starters.
Well, yeah. Good place to start. Yeah.
How are you now? I know you're in your shed, aren't you, at the minute?
I'm in my new shed. Yeah.
That's
I hadn't intended to do the backing with all the books, but I have actually got a backing with all the books.
Yeah. And have you read all those?
I've looked at all the pictures.
Good. And have you got some poetry books up there?
No, the poetry books are in the house, which is that way.
Oh, I see. They get taken into the house. That's quite nice.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've got
and
all yours as well.
Is this where you write now in the shed?
I write, I design, and I do most things in the shed now. I've kind of left home.
and the shed's obviously at the bottom of the garden. You're not on an allotment or anything like that?
No, it's at the bottom of the garden, and I've got a little place just outside, which is now covered, so I can do my sculpture and stuff like that. And I've got an easel over here for painting, and computer, obviously. For
very, very traditional northern thing, isn't it, having a shed?
Having a shed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cup of tea in the shed as well.
Oh, have you got electric and everything?
Yeah, I've got electric, Wi-Fi. That's not so traditional.
Well, yes, no, not so traditional. I can't imagine my dad having Wi-Fi in his allotment to tell people about his spuds. So great. And I say you managed to combine lots of different creative things together. And how does poetry fit into all that?
In the gaps, usually. It's a little bit difficult at times. I'm one of those, I don't write, I'm not prolific. I don't write every day. I make a lot of notes, and then every now and again, something will kind of inspire me to write something. But yeah, I'm not prolific because I'm kind of doing stone stuff and writing and painting and trying to earn enough money to pay for this shed. as well. So
Yeah.
and cooking as well. So you just have to fill the gaps, really.
Yeah, well, it's nice that creativity comes in all different forms, isn't it? I mean, it's all various forms of communication, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I've been quite consciously thinking about the fact that some of my visual art has to kind of reflect the way that I write as well. And it hasn't always, they've been a bit, I've kind of used one to express one lot of things, and then maybe the writing to express another lot of ideas. But at the moment, what I'm trying to do is get them all to be a little bit more harmonious, I guess.
Now that sounds quite fascinating. I'm intrigued now as to which art form fulfills which part of your sort of inner landscape.
I guess if I'm anything, number one, I'm a painter, and a sculptor probably second. And I've always, with my painting and my sculpture, I've always had this idea of things which are unlikely. So even though a lot of my paintings are quite abstract, they're often about layers of stuff, stuff being hidden, things that aren't obvious. So some of my stone sculptures are things which balance very precariously. And that's an idea that I've always liked, this idea of things just, how is that surviving like that? Because I think, I often wonder how we're all surviving like that, really.
Well, that balance is a very interesting notion. Now, have you got a poem for us to kick us off?
So this is, I'm going to start off with this, which is actually one of the old. You asked me, we had a quick chat yesterday, and you asked me what the first poem I ever wrote was. I can't do that one because we were having a little chat earlier, that it does contain some of the words which are a bit pre-Watershed. But this is one of the earliest poems that I wrote. And it's kind of about where I used to live, which was actually quite a nice little suburb of Southport. And then they built a big housing estate right next to it, which was overspill from some of the slightly rougher areas of Liverpool. And it all got a little bit tense. So it's kind of about that. It's called Round Here. Over the road, a woman of excessive proportions, too heavy for her height, seemed to move in two independent halves as she lumbered after the dog with her watering can, like some crazed shepherd rain goddess rounding up the dripping mutt. And Jack, next door, looked askance at my amusement and told me how bloody rattlers would find it tough round here and end up skinned and hung from lines by them bloody kids who peed in his milk bottles.
That's a great one. That's great. And how old were you, do you think, when you wrote that?
I'm just having a look. There's a date on it. So I'd be about, I don't know, 18, something like that.
At 18. So, and you were living in Southport at the time?
I was just living in Southport, but about to move off to art college.
Yeah, so I'm fascinated because I've been through the journey, but I'm fascinated to hear other people's journey, that you would sit and write that, because many people, well, you're quite a manly man, I know you're very gentle, but on the outside, and the idea of you sitting at the age of 18 and writing that might go against people's preconceptions of what a young man might do at the age of 18. What were your thoughts around that time?
That's a really good point. So this is true. You and I have got a lot of things in common. So we're only about a month apart in our birthdays, and also we also had a tragedy in our childhood. So you lost your mum quite early, and I lost my sister when I was 10. And I think it made me a little bit it made me not try very hard at school. I was actually quite good at school, but I always had this thing at the back of my mind that I hadn't kind of resolved some issue or other. And yet at the same time at school, I was very good at maths and I was very good at art. I was absolutely terrible at English. I mean, really terrible. I failed my English O-levels because I used to do English language and English literature. I failed both of those miserably. I'm slightly dyslexic as well, which obviously I think didn't help. And almost, and so there were a couple of things. One was, you've been told you're really bad at English, and yet I was quite good at communicating. With words, I was quite good at talking and expressing ideas that way. But I kind of got away with it a little bit through drawing and so on. I kind of didn't want to be told I wasn't good at English. So part of me wanted to prove that I could use words to communicate very simple ideas. And I don't know, I must have come across some free-form poetry, because most of my stuff is quite free. I mean, I love rhyming stuff as well. And I thought, that's a really good way of summing up how you can tell that little story. And so I started writing it down.
I like that. I like that it's an act of defiance.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
that's nice, and obviously a yearning for something that's not there. And communication. And do you remember what the first poetry books were that you read? Who was like an inspiration?
Okay, so I've never been. I started really reading quite late. So all the textbooks I was meant to read at school, and I never read. You would get Wordsworth, and you would get things that you were meant to study as part of English literature, and I hated it. I read, but I was worse with books than probably with poetry. So what was the one that you had to read? Jane Eyre or something like that. It was one of those. I read the first sentence and just thought, nah, come on.
You can give it a bit more than the first sentence, Pete.
Well, maybe I gave it the first paragraph. But no, that didn't do it. 1984, I did read. That was the one book that I read, the school book that I read.
Yeah.
But the first poet that I read that I really engaged with, and it was only in translation, and only because I'd actually heard him in his native language, was Mayakovsky, who was a Russian poet of the Russian Revolution. Was an out-and-out, supported revolution, a total believer. And what he did, and, so we had kind of like the idea of ranting poets and so on, but he was a declaiming poet. He would declaim this stuff. So they were like, he did it like it was a speech. And I heard it in Russian first on a tape. I had a tape. I can't find it. I've lost it. But I was just totally taken in, because Russian actually is a beautiful language to listen to, and and
he's very, very passionate.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's one of the things that I've liked. I've liked poets that are passionate. The idea of it being some sort of parlour game never appealed to me. So I can understand, and I can understand, having seen you perform, in front of an audience. There is a very Russian stance and energy about the way you perform, and I know you're a socialist at heart, but there is. I think you've taken on something from Mayakovsky.
Well, I hope that would be brilliant if I had, because that passion and that belief, the idea that as you get older, you start that politically you move to the right. Well, not really.
that would bring you into the centre, Pete, I think.
Maybe. Yeah.
I've got to say, my politics are such that I've tried never to be party politics, but judge each thing as it comes. And I've got a little poem which sort of illustrates the way I try to approach it as a not trying to do a big paintbrush over the whole of the thing, but trying to find the bits that I can be certain about. And this is called Things I Wouldn't Be Seen Dead In. I'll never wear a onesie. I'll never wear Crocs, tank top, flip-flops, sandals with socks. If you see me wearing dungarees, kill me, please. A puffer jacket is in that bracket, but a covering for my face is ace and makes the chances greater that later someone won't be wearing a ventilator.
Beautiful.
Because I've been watching all the stuff recently about it's the 19th, isn't it, when everything's lifted, and I'm not sure. I think I'm going to voluntarily wear, as a matter of courtesy, wear a mask unless I'm
not
told.
A brown paper bag.
Yeah, it's not a paper bag, unless I'm told not to. You could get a very big roll neck, couldn't you, and just hide under that. But I just think there's something, because it's not about saving yourself; it's about trying to save other people.
Absolutely.
There's something that we need to take the initiative. I think.
Well, my son has just moved to Japan, and I've been lucky enough. I've been out to Japan a couple of times, and there everybody wears masks. During the winter, if they've got a cold.
Yes.
Or if they've got the flu, and they don't wear it to not catch anything, they wear it so that they don't pass it on to somebody.
Yeah.
And I think that's all these people, these kind of COVID deniers, you won't get me wearing a muzzle type idiots. They miss the point that it's about.
It's a bit like tissues. You're on a tissue. You're trying to stop the thing going.
Yeah. So it's.
Now, I know you've got a book out, and I know that in the book there are some of your paintings as well, isn't there?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So show us some of those.
Okay.
Because show us the cover to start off with, Pete.
Okay.
That's one of your paintings, isn't it?
That is one of the paintings.
So I see what you're saying about abstract.
But also layers, and so things over things behind things. Things that only reveal part of themselves because something else covers them, and then things that cut through all of it. So that's
show us a couple more then.
Couple more. See them there? Oh yeah, there you go. So
use of colour, I know because my son paints, use of colour is particularly what a lot of people pick up on. I find that sort of quite relevant to the way we write poems as well. Do you find that there are elements in painting and poetry that are symbiotic, as it were?
I mean, a lot of my paintings are actually to do with exactly that, because I tend to listen. I listen to a lot of music, and I've got music playing absolutely all of the time, and often the painting will often come from listening to the music and trying to almost express that piece of music in color, with color. And with movement, and so I paint very quickly. I'm not one of these people who spends weeks and weeks and weeks over a painting. I do them very quickly because they're about listening to the music. And often what I'll do is I'll listen to a piece of music over and over again, and then turn it off and go, right, now I want to kind of play that back in my head, and now use my hands to make that piece of music.
No, I understand that, and capturing the mood filtered through yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because my son Johnny, when he paints, sometimes he dances when he paints. It's one of his paintings behind there, look.
Yeah.
And he paints the same thing again and again very often, but sometimes you wouldn't recognise it, because although it's the same structure, maybe it's hills and trees or something like that, it's something to do with the mood and the internal landscape that he's exploring. At that particular moment, all the colours are different, and all the shapes are just different, and is applying it is different. And I must have got in the garage, I must have got about maybe 200 paintings that are essentially...
I've seen your garage, and I've seen your bathtubs as well.
Yes, that's right. Essentially all the same painting, but I could probably do an exhibition and you'd think they're all different paintings. And it's quite interesting, isn't it, that we have this thing where the moment we actually do the creating is fundamental to what we're creating. Yeah,
I think so. And so I went to the National Portrait Gallery, and I remember seeing lots of paintings which were like photographs, and you kind of think, well, why didn't you just take a photograph?
Yeah.
Because there's no, I don't get that kind of. It's very skillful, brilliant, but it's a bit like being a photographer and just obsessed with the equipment that you've got, not with the photographs you're taking. And there's a little bit of that about some of these beautifully super accurate, super perfect pictures of people.
Now, somebody's asked what the name of the
name of the book
is.
It's called, I've typed it in, it's called Selected Moments of Machine Life.
Oh, you've typed it in, have you? Well done.
Yeah.
Well done. And why is it called that?
It's one of the poems that's in the book, and I'm not actually, I wasn't intending to read that one, but...
well, you don't have to, I'm just asking.
I always wonder why it is that people call albums the things that do. I'm noticing, but it's usually because it's the best title of a track, and they call the album that. And so there's an element of, it's got one of the best titles in the book, because I tend to use one-word titles for most of my poems, and this one's slightly longer. And it was a little bit about, I've worked in factories, and it's a little bit about how that totally fills your life, the sound of machinery and the grinding of gears and stuff.
All right. Now, give us another poem. You can read that one if you like, or you can read any
I'm not going to read that one. I'm going to read one from the book, though. The book's available from Flapjack Press. I think it's in the cheapy bin, Flapjack Press now, but anyway, there you go. But this is about another current topic. Henry and I do remember, have had a number of chats about the idea that poetry shouldn't be just a speech, even though you might want to give a speech, or you might be very angry or upset about a particular issue. So I didn't want to give a speech about this. So this is one that I wanted to do in the form of a poem. And it's about refugees and, asylum seekers, refugees. I was lucky enough to spend a holiday in Sicily with all of my family, and we got a very nice hotel. But we got it very cheap because somebody cancelled, and so we managed to get in a quite nice hotel. We went out for a walk, and we saw these refugees around an unlit monument in the evening, and it was like a work of art. You kind of thought it was a sculpture of some kind, but it wasn't. And then I noticed that there were these three guys who'd obviously come, because Sicily gets everybody who comes across the Mediterranean, and these three guys were pitched up in a car park of a supermarket. It's called Nothing. I'm trying not to look down, but I'm 6 floors up, carrying a few pounds and an iced drink by a rooftop pool. The price of my flight would keep you for a year or more. The price of this iced drink would feed all of you for a day. I'm trying not to look down. As you shuffle about, laughing and non-stop natter, busy as bees and peeing in the bushes. You tidy your mattresses, all you possess, whilst downstairs my son's room is like an explosion in a clothing factory. I'm trying not to look down on this perfect dignity, on values that we have hidden. I'm trying not to look down at smiles that say you are the ones who have everything. I'm trying not to look down when I should be looking up.
Thanks, Pete. That's great. As you say, there's something more considered about a poem than merely a speech, and it bears repetition and bears going over, and that's definitely a poem. And I love the repetition in it, and the obviously the twist at the end. Did that poem come to you as a stream of consciousness, or did you need to work on it?
It came very much as a stream of consciousness. I mean, I wrote it there and then. And then I think I went over it a couple of weeks later and maybe just tried to craft it a little bit. But essentially, yeah, I mean, most of my poems come straight out.
Yeah, I love it when you're writing and you don't actually know the end of the poem.
Yeah.
You're either typing or you're writing, and then the end comes and you just think, oh, that's better than I thought you were going to be.
Yeah. And then and then I know you and I both like a ditty, and but some of those start with the last line.
Some of them do, or at least a sense of where you're going. I do. I love playing with words. Now I'm going to ask people to send in questions for you. So I shall be looking at the Q&A bit. Let's have a look at the Q&A bit, see if we've got any questions. Here we are. Where can we find your work, art and poetry? Have you any exhibitions coming up? That's a good question.
Okay.
Now, while you answer that, Pete, I'm going to go and get something. So, but you tell them where you go, where your exhibition is.
Oh my God, where's he going? What's he going to get? So you can buy my pictures. They are online at the a gallery which is down in Cornwall, and it's called the Terre Verte Gallery. It's at terreverte.com. I'll put the details up in a bit. A Terre Verte Gallery. So some of my work's online there. And the painting, I mean, I've always painted, so the paintings are built up over a number of years. Most of the ones that are for sale and the ones in the book were done in, I think, between 2016 and 2019. The poetry in the book is actually over a long period of time. So I've actually got 2 other books out, but I don't think they're available anymore.
You had a book during the miners' strike, didn't you? That's called
called Strike.
Called Strike, and then Personal Vendetta. Because you used to be called John Bitumen.
Yeah.
Your persona was very, what shall I say, strident.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that he's not strident anymore, but he's probably more considered these days.
Yeah, it was definitely more strident then. So that was, it was called Personal Vendetta. And there is a lot of stuff which is very much me trying to get even with things, people.
That's a great thing. You can rewrite history in writing, can't you? And put the facts straight. So sometimes when you miss. Now, the reason I nipped off, Pete, is because you did me a fantastic, for my birthday. Oh, if I can hold it, sculpture. I'm going to lose my head from it, so that which is very heavy and very beautiful. It was in my living room. I'll give people an idea. I'll give it a 360 there. Now, how long did that take you?
That probably took about probably took about 6 months to do. But I mean, working on it a couple of hours every now and again. I'm quite lazy, so things will. And stone carving is incredibly therapeutic, and so it is one of those things that you can just completely lose yourself in. And but equally, you don't want to be lost for too long. I've
got to say, I love it, and Johnny often runs his hand down it. because it's such a lovely thing to touch.
Yeah.
Smooth, and I mean it looks perfectly shaped. It's cracking me wall, by the way. It's that heavy.
It is heavy, yeah.
The ledge I've put it on, there's a little crack underneath it. But thank you. It's gorgeous. But that gives people an idea of some of the stuff that you're doing. So we're talking about playing with words. I've got a poem playing with. So one of the things I'm looking at the moment is I'm writing a new Radio 4 show about aging. So I've been looking at aging, and there's an island near Japan where the residents there, there's a far greater percentage of people who reach 100 and beyond 100, and they put it down to a yam, sweet potato, and it's purple. So that set me thinking about, sort of what it is. And apparently there's enzymes in this potato that help make your brain sustain for longer. Because, from birth, we lose brain cells. So I've written a poem called One Part of Me is Slimming. Now you have to read this with a northern accent or it don't work. Here we go. My brain is not getting fatter. I'm losing white and grey matter, especially the latter, containing essential data. Yet slimming is meant to flatter, so goes the patter. A myth I easily shatter as memories scatter. I'm mad as a hatter, putting my faith in water, and an oily fish platter, and a purple sweet potato. That was a fun thing to write.
It is indeed. I'm just answering somebody's question while you're doing that.
Oh, right. What's that?
What's the thing made of?
Oh, what the sculpture?
Yeah. So
what is it made of?
It's made of Hopton Wood stone, which is from Derbyshire, which is just down the road from here. So.
All right. What's your favourite thing to work with?
Oh, alabaster, but it's not cheap.
Right. Okay. Well,
and it's also a little bit fragile, but it's just so beautiful when you kind of get to the final stages of polishing it up. So,
right. I'm going to look see if there's any more questions. If I can find me, my mouse. Let's have a look. Do you write about stones?
Not really. No, but I mean, I've never been one for writing about nature particularly. I know, Henry, you do, because I've been illustrating a book for you and your Instagram pages. And so some of those, I know you write about it a lot more than I do. I mean, but having said that, I am starting to, I think, engage a little bit more with maybe I think that's a little bit of a lockdown thing, going for walks and
yeah, do you know what appeals to me, Pete, is if I sit somewhere in nature, whether it be in the back garden or whether it be on top of one of the cliffs, because I live by the sea. There's a lot of sea and sky in my poems because I've got a lot of sea and sky in my vision. But anyway, if I go on a park and I sit under a tree or something, I find if I sit for long enough, then what I'm seeing and the bits that I see, as opposed to the bit that any person sat next to me will see, somehow reflect how I'm feeling. And so I find it interesting that I can describe things, and as I'm describing them, I realise that I'm actually describing how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
And I love that. It's quite an interesting exercise, and it sort of gets the internal thoughts outside where you can see them on a page and actually understand them a little bit better.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I probably need to spend a little bit more time is going for, because often if I go for a walk, I go with somebody, and then I find I'm getting distracted and not really engaging a lot of the time with Well, I'm kind of engaging with what's around me, but not in the way that I would if I was on my own, and just because I'm quite happy to just sit and look at stuff. There's a very, very famous artist, Hopkinson, Michael. It'll come to me. He never took notes and never sketched. Just went straight to the painting. But he said, and he used to spend a lot of time in India and just loved the colours of the saris and everything else that was around him, but never sketched and never took notes of any kind. And I thought that was amazing. So, and I work a little bit like that. I don't tend to make a lot of sketches and do a lot of notes. But what I thought was fascinating was he just said, "I'm just storing it."
Yes.
In here, in here, and then
and filtering it, because I think the reason why everybody writes different stuff is that you carry with you all the experiences you've had and everything you've seen and heard and tasted and smelt from birth, and then the new bit of information goes into that mix and comes out. Differently.
Howard Hodgkin is the guy.
Howard Hodgkin. Yeah. Now, I've got a question here from Veronica Emma. It says, do you consider poetry needs to be politely anarchic? That's quite a lovely word, isn't it? Politely anarchic in order to be artistically useful rather than just amusing. I bet you've not been asked that question before.
Definitely not, no. Maybe.
Maybe.
Or sometimes.
I think it's about, sort of, if it's something's too obvious and only works on one level, then it is useful, but it's not necessarily as useful as something that's got a bit more depth or a bit more complication to it, where you can enjoy going over it again. Obviously, we talked recently, haven't we, about the idea of ambiguity in poetry.
And, I think if you were writing a love poem, you would not approach it with requiring anarchic, whatever.
Polite anarchy, yeah.
Yeah, I think you would. Well, maybe, I don't know.
Anarchy is a strange thing.
Depends what your love life's like, I guess.
Yeah, because putting anything off kilter might be considered anarchy, and very often what we do in poetry is question things, slightly off kilter. It's an interesting question. I'm gonna ruminate more on it. I think an element of anarchy has got to be there to motivate you. If you were at total peace, I don't think you'd write anything, would you?
No, probably not. There's that old story, isn't there, about the Buddhist who only has one. Because the thing I'm trying to do at the moment is take words out of my poems. I want there to be less words in them.
Right.
So I love, so the idea of haikus is actually, I find them fascinating, and I think a lot of them are just beautifully done. But I like that idea of trying to reduce everything down to a single, super strength essence, if you like. So I quite like the idea of taking words out there. But the story about the Buddhist, of course, is that he only had a cup to drink out of.
Yeah.
And that was his only possession. And it's a little bit like that for me, trying to get down to, the absolute minimalism, if you like, of idea. And then, of course, he saw a guy drinking with
luxury.
But then he saw a guy drinking out of his cupped hands.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And then his life fell apart.
Yeah, well, people do. Sure, we've done it ourselves at times. Now, have you got another poem for us?
Yeah, no, having said that, I was going to do one, but I can't find it. Maybe I'll do that one when I have found it. I'm going to do this one, which is it's a slight change of subject and emphasis, but it's called "I Am Not a Brand," and it's fairly self-explanatory from the title. I noticed somebody on one of my social media things this morning, said they were launching a brand. And I thought it was interesting. When I looked at it, I couldn't actually tell what, it was a company, but I couldn't actually tell what they did. It was just a brand that they'd launched. But so that seems to have missed the point. But I love this idea that people now seem to become brands. You know, we talk about Ronaldo and people like that, footballers, and they're a brand. Crazy. I am not a brand. I'm not a brand. I'm a free man. Substitute your own preferred description. I do not have a logo or a headline typeface of choice with a secondary typeface. I do not have a colour palette. There are no Pantone references on me, though if it's not black, grey, white, or navy blue, I'll know the reason why. I do not have a tone of voice suitable for all occasions. I do not have preferred grammatical inclinations or capitalizations. I will not refer to brand guidelines because I don't have any brand guidelines. So when I want to say get stuffed, I will not substitute. I respectfully disagree. I do not have a brand mission or mission statement or brand identifier. I do not have any brand values. I'm not striving to be the best in category. I'm not always brimming with passion or humility. I'm not always trying to improve or be the best that I can be, especially not at the weekends. I'm not always committed to innovation and quality. I need to steal, to tamper, to alter things. Just values and desires, peace, love, and happiness. I am not trying to create brand awareness. Hello, it's me.
I like that. Do you know, I woke up this morning with arthritis in my fingers, and I was thinking about how we have all these imperfections, and yet there's a sort of a desire to speak to the world as though we have no imperfections. There's, you know, we're taught through advertising and through the way American shows are always, they're always very attractive people in American shows. There's nobody overweight. There's nobody, you know, sort of with particular warts or, you know, sort of any features that don't fit into the aspiration of American shows. I think the English shows are a little bit better, but there's still, if you look at all the adverts, there's still this idea that we're all doing very well. And of course, they're not. We're not doing all very well. I remember seeing a show at Manchester, in the Green Room, which is a little theatre in Manchester. And I went to it not knowing what the show was, but it was a woman, and she was totally naked, and she was half lit, and there must have been about 200 people there, and she was doing a monologue.
You sure it was the Green Room?
And it was very gentle and very, but she was a thalidomide survivor, and she had very small arms, and she stood there totally naked and spoke in such a calm manner, and the refrain of her piece was, "You're already assessing the damage." Now, this was probably, I'm talking about 30 to 40 years ago, and I remember it so vividly, and the bravery of this woman to stand there and a sense of self that she would do this. I was so impressed. And I've got to say, this whole idea of us looking at perfection downwards, as opposed to looking at what we can add to the world, you know, and going up, is something I've been, you know, in my poetry and in my life, I think I've been very conscious of. So your brand piece, I think, fits into this idea that we're all somehow, you know, made to think we should be better than we are.
Yeah, I was watching that Kathy Burke program the other night about wealth, and I thought that was kind of fascinating. And again, you know, so on there you had people who just made TikTok videos,
yeah,
and have become millionaires through doing it. And you know, they were all in their 20s. And living in an extremely flash house, living together, and all they did was wear masks, and just do daft things, and that had made them a millionaire. And
you know, I'm happy for them.
Yeah,
but it doesn't relate much to my life.
Not really, but they get millions and millions of views. And then there was another woman who'd been on Love Island and was now doing what's the name of that? There's a thing in where you can subscribe and watch people take their clothes off, basically.
Oh, right. Okay.
It's another of the another online platform, and you know,
Like that.
And so that was her kind of thing, and you just thought, well, okay,
yeah.
Self-awareness maybe is not everybody's strength, is it?
It's a very strange thing. Now, we're not going to get millions of viewers for our next thing, but we're actually doing a show together for one of the art centres, aren't we?
We are doing a show for the Charles Causley Trust in Cornwall, which is on the, I don't know if the readers, it's on the 24th of July, Saturday. It's from 5 o'clock in the afternoon to 6:15 or thereabouts.
We should just be reading poems, won't we, really?
We'll be just reading poems, and there'll be a bit of a Q&A thing, and if nobody asks any questions, we'll just carry on reading poems until we give up.
And maybe having a laugh, which would be great.
But you can find tickets, I think, for that if you look for the Charles Causley Trust. Charles Causley, famous Cornish poet.
And you'll be putting it up on Facebook and Twitter.
Yep, all of those.
And you're just Pete Ramskill, isn't it, at Facebook and Twitter?
Pretty much, yeah. But you know,
you put your paintings on Instagram, Pete.
They are, yeah, but they're just on my. I just have the one Instagram account, so they're all on there, along with pictures of my cat or cats and various other things that just happen to be of interest.
So what's that called? That's just Pete Ramskill, is it?
Yep.
You're very, very good, very well segued into my next poem with the mention of cat. I'm doing a gig at the Cat Asylum in Collingham, which is near Newark, and I wrote a poem, I think it was yesterday.
I saw it this morning.
Because the idea of a cat asylum seemed a bit weird. So I've written...
I've got a cat poem as well.
Oh, you've got a cat poem, have you?
Yeah.
So I've written this poem, it's called Cat Asylum. Let me be explicit. In order to visit, you don't need a feline that's not feeling fine, tiddles talking in riddles, a puss that's lost the sus, a kitty that's gone all Walter Mitty, a ginger who's a whinger, a tortoise shell who's not doing so well, a tom that's lost its aplomb, a moggy that feels like it's a doggy, a fur ball that's not fully there at all, a Persian with an aversion, a Manx with angst, a long hair with a faraway stare, an Himalayan who's stopped playing, a ragamuffin who's lost his stuffing, a Russian blue that's missing a screw, a Scottish fold who fears getting old, a Munchin that's swallowed a truncheon, a Sphinx that thinks it stinks, a Siamese that's not at ease, a Burmese that's hard to please. You don't need any of these. To open up the doors, you need no insanity clause. So whisk along there now, it's the cat's meow. The Cat Asylum, Collingham. But it was a little bit of an advert poem, Pete, because they're writing poems for adverts these days.
Absolutely.
I thought I'd give that a try. There's no depth to that one. It's just.
No. Shall I quickly do my cat poem? It's a very short one.
Yes.
Perfect timing. It's called the Psychedelic Furs.
All right, good one.
And this is definitely a true story. The cats have torn the chairs to shreds. Their fur and purr marks on the beds. They swallow wasps, but never learn that wasps will leave them with a burn. They bring things in dead of night. They're sound asleep when it gets light. They pinch your food without a pardon, but at least they poo in the neighbour's garden.
Good one. So, do we both like playing with words?
Yeah.
And comedy and stuff. Do you see that as separate to the poems? Because I always remember as a kid when I'd read something like Spike Milligan's poems that I loved. He would put the funny ones in a book of funny poems, and then the serious ones in a book of serious poems. And then I saw Roger McGough, and I remember thinking, and obviously with you growing up in Southport, I'm sure the Liverpool poets were influenced. I saw that he would play with words alongside some of the more serious poems, and so I've always put them together so that you move from one to the other, and seen them as just different moods that you might be in.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think I've seen Roger McGough. I saw him in the 70s in Liverpool, and he's brilliant at that. But so are you. Let's be honest. You're probably one of the best I've ever seen. The great thing that you do is you leave people with the option of having a tear in their eye from weeping at a poem and laughing. So you can always say, "Oh, I was." God, he made me laugh so much. You've always got the option.
Well, I do like that idea, and I know because I've worked with you on stage that you do move from one to the other, and I think I would hope that we've started a movement, Pete. That would be nice, wouldn't it? Of bringing the comedy poems into the fireside with the serious poems, so that we can all share them together. I think the idea of light verse, they used to call it, didn't they? Being sort of out there as something that's not worthy in any sort of way. I just think if we were heavy all the time.
There's comedy in everything, isn't there? And that's the that's what some of those really hard work kind of things you see on telly sometimes. You just think, why has nobody ever made a joke? Yeah. Because at some point, to relieve the tension, somebody would have said something or done something funny, whether it be intentional or unintentional.
I used to like.
I've been to funerals where people have done crazy things, and I nearly dropped a coffin, which was one of
I used to like Alan Bleasdale. The way that it was agonizingly dramatic, and yet funny at the same time. You still do get some, but they're few and far between. Stuff that grips you in both ways.
Absolutely right.
But when they do, it's great. So I'm going to wind up and say thank you, but I'd like a final poem from yourself. It's been great doing these. You've seen quite a few of them. I've seen all of them. I missed one. I don't know what. I think I was out, but I've seen all of them. I am. I've done 10 altogether. I am actually doing from next Wednesday at noon. I'm actually doing 8 more Zooms, but this time for the Manchester libraries. They saw the ones we've done, and they were very impressed. And they asked me to do to talk to some Manchester poets. So I could have talked to you as a Southport lad, along with the Manchester poets, couldn't I? But so if anybody's interested out there to see any more, next Wednesday at noon, same bat time as it were, do tune in. If you have a look on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, if you put Henry Normal, New Poetry Society, Manchester Libraries, it'll all come up, and you can follow me or find some way. You'll if you want to, you'll find it. So Pete, have you got a final poem for us today? And thanks ever so much for being my guest. It's been lovely to chat to you.
Always nice to chat, Henry. I'm going to do one which is this poem is based on I've always been fascinated when you send messages on your phone, and how it puts in words that wasn't the word that you were intending to put. So sometimes accidentally you end up putting the wrong word because it's spelled correct. Doesn't spell correct, it actually puts in a different word.
Yeah.
So what I was quite fascinated by the idea of taking a famous poem and trying to send it as a text message and to see what actually happened next.
Yeah.
So this is by William Worries. I wandered around, ask a clown, that floats on high over all value and hilarious, when all at once I saw a couple of people, a house of golf dads, beside the last library of trees, fluttering and dancing in the breakfast. Continuous as the start that shows, and twitter on the mighty will, they stressed, very sad face, and never ever lived. Along the morning of a bayou, 10 things say I am a Glaswegian. Tossing these hopes in sprightly danger, the waves before they dance, but they outfit the special waves in glasses. A poet could not believe in Gary. In such a jocular compound, I gazed and gazed, but literally thought, what weather the show to me has breakfast. For often, when I on Myrtle come, in various other places move, they flash update the inward eyeliner, which is the black one in Solarium. And then my Henry will plead furious and dances with the daft.
That's great. That's great. I love the fact that you've done that. Thank you very much for that, Pete. I once sent a text to Lem Sisse, telling him that I thought his poem was efficient. It's a thing, isn't it? With your poem very efficient, and spell check changed it to effluent. Very difficult to roll back from that.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. And somebody's asked about the ones that you've missed. So if you've missed any of the episodes, they are all recorded and they will be up. I think at least 4 or 5 of them are already up on the Inspire website. So if you type Inspire, which is Nottinghamshire Libraries, if you type that up, you should be able to get them. So all the early ones, Bridie, Panya, they're up, and they will, all 10 will be up, and Pete will be up in the next few days and weeks. So do check out any of those who you've missed. I'll finish with a poem. So I'd just like to thank again Inspire, and I'd like to thank Nottingham Poetry Festival and everybody concerned with those. And I've really enjoyed doing these, and I hope you've enjoyed them too. This is an old poem that I wrote in my 20s, and I think it's still as relevant today as it was then. I hope you enjoy it. It's called Love Like Hell. I have this theory that when you die, your whole life is rerun like a Sensorama video, and you have to sit through it all again, every second, unedited, in a room with every friend and every relative that's ever been in the least bit involved. Now, depending on what sort of life you've led, this could be heaven, or it could be hell. Think about it. Everyone's going to see those private moments, those very private moments. Breaking wind in the bath, wiping bogies down the side of the armchair, all the pathetic lies exposed for all to see, or the naff chat-up lines you used when you were a teenager and still use later, or the places you had sex when you still lived at home, the things you did to get by, the way you justified it all to yourself, and every really dumb-arse shit-for-brains mistake you ever made. You'll have to make yourself watch again. But then maybe there'll be those moments of rare beauty, the moments of tenderness, the times you cried because you'd messed up, the things you meant to say, the questions in the mirror, the promises you made when you first held your own child, the time your lover's face glowed like beauty on fire, and the time you said, I love you, and believe your love would outlive the universe. The time you first held in your stomach, thinking no one would notice, and the regret in your eyes when you feared you were getting old. When you couldn't sleep one night, and you lay awake sweating and praying he didn't die before doing something. Something. Just something.